My mother smiled as she told everyone I was the only child who never made anything of myself. My sister laughed. Even my uncle shook his head. Then the bank manager walked through the restaurant doors, looked straight at me, and said, "Good afternoon, Miss Carter. Your private meeting room is ready. In less than 5 minutes." My family's smiles disappeared. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, my parents would eventually be proud of me. I was wrong. For as long as I could remember, my older sister, Olivia, was the family's golden child. She could do no wrong. If she quit a job, Mom called her brave. If I worked 60-hour weeks, Dad said I was obsessed with money. No matter what happened, I was always the disappointment. That Saturday evening, my parents invited the whole family to celebrate my father's 62nd birthday at one of the nicest steakhouses in town. Nearly 30 relatives filled the private dining room. My mother insisted everyone dress nicely. "It'll be a classy evening," she had said over the phone. When I arrived, everyone looked at me before returning to their conversations. I smiled politely and took the only empty chair at the far end of the table. Olivia was already sitting beside Mom, wearing a designer dress that she loved, reminding everyone had cost over $3,000. "Emma finally made it," she said with a smirk. "We weren't sure she could afford the gas." The table erupted in laughter. I forced a smile. I had heard worse. A waiter began pouring drinks while my father stood to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said proudly. "Family is everything." Everyone raised their glasses. Then he looked directly at me. "Well, almost everyone." More laughter. My cheeks burned, but I stayed silent. Growing up had taught me one thing. Arguing only made things worse. My mother smiled as she told everyone I was the only child who never made anything of myself. My sister laughed. Even my uncle shook his head. Then the bank manager walked through the restaurant doors, looked straight at me, and said, "Good afternoon, Miss Carter. Your private meeting room is ready. In less than 5 minutes." My family's smiles disappeared. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, my parents would eventually be proud of me. I was wrong. For as long as I could remember, my older sister, Olivia, was the family's golden child. She could do no wrong. If she quit a job, Mom called her brave. If I worked 60-hour weeks, Dad said I was obsessed with money. No matter what happened, I was always the disappointment. That Saturday evening, my parents invited the whole family to celebrate my father's 62nd birthday at one of the nicest steakhouses in town. Nearly 30 relatives filled the private dining room. My mother insisted everyone dress nicely. "It'll be a classy evening," she had said over the phone. When I arrived, everyone looked at me before returning to their conversations. I smiled politely and took the only empty chair at the far end of the table. Olivia was already sitting beside Mom, wearing a designer dress that she loved, reminding everyone had cost over $3,000. "Emma finally made it," she said with a smirk. We weren't sure she could afford the gas. The table erupted in laughter. I forced a smile. I had heard worse. A waiter began pouring drinks while my father stood to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," he said proudly. "Family is everything." Everyone raised their glasses. Then he looked directly at me. "Well, almost everyone." More laughter. My cheeks burned, but I stayed silent. Growing up had taught me one thing. Arguing only made things worse. I considered telling them everything. I could have explained that I advised successful business owners across the state. I could have mentioned the investment portfolio worth millions. I could have shown them photos from business conferences where I had spoken. Instead, I simply smiled. "It's okay." That answer confused them. Mom frowned. "What's okay?" "I don't need to explain myself." Silence lingered for a moment before Olivia rolled her eyes. See? That's exactly what broke people say. The laughter returned. I looked out the restaurant window. Across the street stood the city's largest private bank. I checked my watch. 6:52 p.m. My private meeting there was scheduled for 7. I had planned to leave quietly after dessert. Nobody here even knew why I had come downtown. Dad noticed me checking the time. Got somewhere important to be? His voice dripped with sarcasm. Before I could answer, Mom smiled. Probably another job interview. The table burst into laughter one last time. I stood slowly. I should get going. Dad shook his head. Running away already? Olivia smirked. Don't forget to ask someone for gas money. I picked up my handbag without saying another word. As I reached the dining room door, I heard my mother speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. I just wish she would stop pretending. I paused. Not because I wanted to argue. Because I realized something. For years, I had been trying to earn respect from people who had already decided I would never deserve it. I opened the door and walked into the cool evening air. Across the street, the illuminated sign of Hamilton Private Bank glowed against the darkening sky. I crossed the road calmly. Behind me, my family continued laughing, completely unaware that within the next hour, everything they believed about me was about to collapse. The cool evening air felt different the moment I stepped out of the restaurant. For the first time that night, I could breathe. The laughter from inside still echoed in my mind, but instead of feeling angry, I felt strangely calm. Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove themselves. I had finally realized I didn't have to. I crossed the street toward Hamilton Private Bank. The elegant glass building reflected the city lights, giving it a quiet sense of power. Most people thought banks closed at 5. This one was different. Hamilton Private Bank served business owners, investors, and high-net-worth clients through private evening appointments. The security guard opened the front door before I even reached it. Good evening, Miss Carter, he said with a warm smile. Welcome back. I smiled politely. Good evening, Daniel. Inside, everything was quiet. Marble floors stretched across the lobby, and soft piano music played through hidden speakers. A receptionist looked up from her desk. The moment she saw me, she stood immediately. Good evening, Miss Carter. Mr. Harrison is waiting for you. I thanked her and followed the familiar hallway toward the private conference rooms. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, my family was still talking about me. Olivia laughed as she sipped her wine. I honestly don't know why Emma keeps pretending she's successful. Mom nodded. She has always wanted attention. Dad cut another piece of steak. If she had any money at all, we'd know about it. Everyone agreed. None of them noticed that Uncle Robert had quietly walked toward the restaurant entrance. He wanted some fresh air after dinner. Standing outside, he happened to glance across the street. His eyes narrowed. Isn't that Emma? He watched as she disappeared inside Hamilton Private Bank. Curious, he crossed the street. The bank doors remained open because of evening appointments. He stopped just inside the entrance. Before he could ask anything, he heard a familiar voice. Good evening, Miss Carter. Another employee walked over carrying a silver tray with bottled water and coffee. We've prepared your usual meeting room. Robert froze. His eyebrows lifted in confusion. Miss Carter? The same Emma everyone had spent an hour calling broke? He quietly stepped back outside without saying a word. Inside the conference room, I placed my handbag on the polished table. A moment later, the door opened. A man in his late 50s entered with a friendly smile. Emma. He extended his hand. It's always good to see you. Good to see you too, Michael. Michael Harrison wasn't just the branch manager. He had become one of my most trusted financial advisors over the past 5 years. He sat down and opened a leather folder. "I've reviewed everything. The commercial property purchase is ready." I nodded. "Excellent." He slid several documents across the table. "The downtown office building has officially been approved." I glanced over the paperwork. The building had taken nearly 8 months to negotiate. It would become the headquarters for my expanding financial consulting company. Michael smiled. "I also wanted to congratulate you. Your investment portfolio crossed another milestone this week." I looked up. "Already?" He nodded proudly. "As of this afternoon. Your total managed assets are just over $4.8 million. I smiled quietly. Money had never been my goal. Freedom had. The freedom to never depend on people who measured love by success. Michael continued. "There is one more thing." He handed me another folder. "The board has approved your request for the business expansion loan." Although I didn't truly need financing, accepting the low-interest offer made financial sense. Everything was exactly as planned. Across the hallway, Uncle Robert stood near the lobby, pretending to read a brochure. His curiosity kept him there. He couldn't hear every word. But he heard enough. $4.8 million. Investment portfolio. Commercial property. His mouth slowly fell open. The waitress from the restaurant stepped inside the bank carrying an envelope that someone had accidentally left behind. She recognized Uncle Robert. "Weren't you just across the street?" He nodded absent-mindedly. She laughed. "Your family seems nice." Robert didn't answer. His mind was racing. Had they all been completely wrong? Or had Emma simply never told anyone? 20 minutes later, my meeting ended. Michael stood and shook my hand. "Congratulations again. We're honored to continue managing your accounts." "Thank you." As we walked toward the lobby together, every employee we passed smiled politely. "Good night, Miss Carter. Have a wonderful evening. It was nice seeing you again." Professional. Respectful. Completely different from the way my own family had treated me only an hour earlier. Just as I reached the entrance, the restaurant door across the street opened. Several family members were leaving after dinner. Olivia. Mom. Dad. My uncles. My cousins. Their eyes naturally drifted toward the bank. Then they saw something that stopped them in their tracks. The branch manager himself walked beside me. He smiled warmly and said loud enough for those outside to hear. "Good night, Miss Carter. We'll have the documents delivered to your office tomorrow morning." I thanked him. He shook my hand respectfully. Then the security guard held the glass door open for me. Across the street. No one laughed anymore. Olivia's smile disappeared. My mother's face turned pale. Dad stared in complete silence. And Uncle Robert slowly looked at the rest of the family before speaking just 6 words that changed the entire night. "I think we've judged Emma completely wrong." For several seconds, nobody moved. My parents stood frozen on the sidewalk across from Hamilton Private Bank, watching as I thanked Mr. Harrison and walked calmly toward the parking garage. The confident woman they had just seen wasn't the broke daughter they had spent years making fun of. She looked like someone important. Someone respected. Someone they didn't know anymore. The moment my car disappeared around the corner, Olivia finally spoke. "What was that?" Mom forced an awkward laugh. "Oh, there has to be some explanation." Dad folded his arms. "Maybe she works there." Uncle Robert slowly shook his head. "No. I was inside." Everyone turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Mom asked. Robert took a deep breath. I followed Emma into the bank. Olivia frowned. You followed her? I was curious. He looked directly at my father. The employees greeted her by name. They called her Ms. Carter. The branch manager personally welcomed her. Silence. Dad's confident expression began to fade. Robert continued. I heard enough of the meeting to know she wasn't asking for a loan because she was desperate. He paused. I heard them congratulate her. Mom blinked. For what? Robert answered quietly. They said her investment portfolio had passed $4.8 million. No one spoke. Olivia laughed nervously. That's impossible. Robert looked her straight in the eyes. I heard it myself. Dad immediately pulled out his phone. There must be another Emma Carter. Within seconds, he searched my name online. The first results showed nothing unusual. My consulting company wasn't listed under my personal name. Years ago, I had intentionally registered it under Carter Strategic Holdings, keeping my personal life completely separate from my business. Dad looked relieved. See? I told you. Nothing. But Uncle Robert wasn't convinced. Search the company. What company? The one the manager mentioned. The one the manager mentioned. Dad typed again. Carter Strategic Holdings. This time. Several results appeared. A professional company website. Business awards. Financial consulting articles. Interviews. Industry conferences. Olivia leaned closer. Open it. Dad clicked. The homepage displayed a modern office building in downtown Chicago. Beneath it appeared one sentence. Helping businesses protect and grow their wealth since 2018. Mom frowned. What does that have to do with Emma? Dad scrolled lower. Then he stopped. His hand began to shake. Under the leadership section, a professional portrait filled the screen. Me. Wearing a navy blue business suit. Standing in front of the company logo. The caption read, Emma Carter. Founder and Chief Executive Officer. Nobody breathed. Olivia grabbed Dad's phone. No. That can't be right. She opened another page. Then another. Business magazines. Conference speakers. Financial podcasts. Everywhere. My name appeared. One article caught Dad's attention. Young entrepreneur builds multi-million-dollar financial advisory firm. The publication date was almost 2 years old. Dad whispered. 2 years. Mom looked confused. What? This article is 2 years old. He looked at her in disbelief. She's been successful for years. He couldn't finish the sentence. Back at home that night, nobody slept well. Olivia stayed awake searching every article she could find. The more she read, the worse she felt. I had spoken at national business conferences. I had been featured in finance magazines. I had won awards for entrepreneurship. And yet, she had spent dinner calling me broke. Meanwhile, I drove home to my quiet lakefront townhouse. The evening no longer bothered me. In fact, it reminded me why I had chosen distance years ago. I changed into comfortable clothes, made a cup of tea, and stepped onto the balcony overlooking the water. My phone buzzed. It was Michael Harrison. Congratulations again on today's closing. Your new office building officially becomes yours Monday morning. I smiled. One more goal accomplished. Then another notification appeared. Unknown number. I ignored it. Another. And another. Within 10 minutes. 8 missed calls. Then a text message. Dad, Emma, call me when you get home. A second message. Mom, sweetheart, we need to talk. 5 hours earlier. Neither of them had wanted to hear a single word from me. Now, they suddenly couldn't stop calling. I placed the phone face down on the table. Peace was too valuable to interrupt. The next morning, I arrived at my office as usual. Employees greeted me with smiles. The receptionist handed me my schedule. You have a full day. Before I could answer, she looked toward the lobby. There's a family here asking to see you. I frowned. My family? She nodded. They've been waiting almost 30 minutes. Through the glass walls of my office, I saw them. Mom. Dad. Olivia. Standing together. Looking nervous. For the first time in my life. They weren't coming to criticize me. They were coming because they finally realized the daughter they had always underestimated was the one person they could no longer afford to ignore. The receptionist looked at me quietly. They've been waiting since 8:30. I glanced through the glass wall of my office. For years, I had imagined what it would feel like if my parents finally came looking for me. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I felt nothing. No anger. No excitement. Just peace. I picked up my coffee and walked toward the lobby. The moment Mom saw me, she stood so quickly that her chair nearly tipped over. Emma. Her voice sounded softer than I had heard in years. Dad forced an awkward smile. Good morning. Olivia looked at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. I nodded politely. Good morning. No hugs. No smiles. Just silence. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We'd like to talk. I looked at my watch. I have 15 minutes before my first meeting. Follow me. I led them into a private conference room overlooking the city skyline. The same kind of room where million-dollar business deals were signed every week. My parents looked around in disbelief. The walls displayed framed awards. Forbes 30 Under 30 nominee. National Business Leadership Award. Top financial consulting firm. Each one carried my name. Mom slowly whispered. These are all yours? Yes. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Dad finally broke the silence. Emma. Why didn't you tell us? I almost laughed. Instead, I asked one simple question. When exactly would you have listened? Silence. I continued calmly. The night I got my first promotion. You interrupted me to celebrate Olivia's new boyfriend. The day I bought my first property. You asked me to help pay Olivia's credit card debt. The week my company became profitable. You called asking for money without even asking how I was. Mom opened her mouth. Sweetheart, we didn't know. No. I interrupted gently. You didn't want to know. That sentence hit harder than shouting ever could. Olivia wiped away a tear. I didn't realize. I looked at her. You realized enough to laugh at me last night. She lowered her head. I was wrong. For the first time in years. She actually sounded sincere. Dad leaned forward. We owe you an apology. I nodded. Yes. He blinked. You agree? I do. You treated me like I was invisible for over 10 years. You embarrassed me in front of relatives. You told everyone I was broke. You laughed while they laughed. So yes, you owe me an apology. Mom began crying. I never meant to hurt you. I looked directly into her eyes. But you did. And you kept doing it. Nobody had an answer. The room became painfully quiet. Then Dad reached into his jacket pocket. There is another reason we're here. He placed several papers on the table. Our mortgage. I didn't touch them. What about it? He looked embarrassed. We're behind. Olivia slowly added. My wedding deposits have become more expensive than expected. I stared at all three of them. Then I smiled. Not because I found it funny. Because suddenly, everything made sense. They hadn't come because they finally loved me. They came because they finally needed me. I leaned back in my chair. So, you discovered I have money yesterday. And today you're asking for it. Dad quickly shook his head. No. We're asking for help. There's a difference. I folded my hands calmly. Is there? Nobody answered. Mom reached across the table. Emma. We're family. I looked at her hand. Then back into her eyes. I was family yesterday too. Her hand slowly slipped back. Tears rolled down her face. We made mistakes. I nodded. You did. Dad looked desperate. The bank could take the house. Olivia whispered. And if we cancel the wedding now, we'll lose almost everything. I stood and walked toward the window. Far below, thousands of people hurried through the city streets. None of them knew what was happening inside this room. Behind me, Dad spoke again. We're asking for one chance. I turned around slowly. When I was struggling after college, I asked if I could stay in the guest room for 1 month. Mom looked down. You told me there wasn't enough space. I looked at Olivia. A week later, you turned that same room into Olivia's walk-in closet. Neither of them denied it when my car broke down. I asked Dad for a small loan. He closed his eyes. I remember. You told me. Successful people solve their own problems. I smiled gently. I've never forgotten those words. The room became silent once again. Then I picked up the mortgage papers, looked at them for exactly 3 seconds, and handed them back. I think your advice was excellent. Dad stared at me. What? I calmly repeated his own words. Successful people solve their own problems. Nobody moved. Nobody argued. Because every person in that room knew. Those weren't my words. They were his. I walked toward the conference room door and opened it. My assistant will show you out. Mom broke down completely. Emma, please. I paused without turning around. I truly hope everything works out. But my piece is no longer for sale. Then I walked away, leaving my parents sitting together in complete silence for the first time in their lives. And for the first time, they finally understood what it felt like to be left behind. The bank manager stood quietly for a moment while everyone stared at him. Then he looked directly at my father. Mr. Carter, before you continue this celebration, I believe everyone deserves to know who has actually been keeping this family financially alive. The room became completely silent. Dad forced a smile. I'm not sure what you're talking about. The manager calmly placed a thick blue folder on the table. I think you do. He opened the folder. Over the last 6 years, every mortgage payment on your home came from the same private investment account. Mom laughed nervously. That's impossible. We paid for our own house. The manager slowly turned another page. No, ma'am. The account belongs to your daughter. He pointed directly at me. Emma Carter. Every guest looked at me. Some even gasped. Dad's face turned pale. Mom's smile disappeared instantly. No. She whispered. That can't be true. The manager continued. Not only your mortgage. He pulled out another document. The loan for your sister's luxury SUV. Another page. The renovation of your kitchen. Another page. The emergency medical bills 3 years ago. Another page. The property taxes. Another page. The business loan that prevented bankruptcy. Every single payment had come from me. Not from my parents. Not from my sister. From me. The room felt frozen. My sister slowly looked at our parents. You told me. She whispered. Dad paid for everything. Dad couldn't even answer. He simply looked down. The bank manager wasn't finished. There is one more misunderstanding. He projected another document onto the large television screen inside the banquet hall. The title shocked everyone. Family Financial Guarantee Agreement. Underneath it, my signature. The guests leaned forward. The manager explained. When Mr. Carter's business almost collapsed 6 years ago, every bank refused further loans. But one person personally guaranteed every debt. He looked at me. Emma. The audience became completely silent. Without my guarantee, my parents would have lost everything years ago. Their home. Their cars. Their business. Their reputation. Everything. Mom suddenly grabbed Dad's arm. You told me nobody knew. Dad whispered. I thought. You thought? She shouted. You lied to all of us. My sister stepped backward. Tears filled her eyes. So every birthday. Every Christmas. When you told everyone Emma never helped. It was all a lie. Dad couldn't answer. Because it was true. One elderly guest slowly stood up. I remember. Everyone looked toward him. He was my father's oldest business partner. I warned Robert years ago. He sighed. I told him never to mistreat the only person keeping his company alive. Another guest nodded. So that's why Emma was always missing family vacations. Someone else added. She was working. She was paying their bills. The whispers spread through the ballroom. One table. Then another. Then another. The entire room realized the truth. The successful daughter had spent years quietly protecting the same people who constantly humiliated her. Mom suddenly walked toward me. Her voice trembled. Emma. I didn't know. I looked directly into her eyes. You never asked. She began crying. I thought. You believed every lie because it was easier than believing in me. She couldn't deny it. Because it was true. Then my sister slowly approached. I'm sorry. I honestly believed Mom and Dad. She wiped away tears. I thought you abandoned us. I gently smiled. No. I just stopped explaining myself. Silence. Then the bank manager cleared his throat once more. There is one final document. The room became quiet again. He opened a sealed envelope. This instruction was written by Emma herself 3 years ago. He looked at me. He looked at me. Would you still like me to honor it? I nodded. Yes. He unfolded the paper. Effective immediately. The financial guarantees protecting Robert and Linda Carter are permanently withdrawn. The room exploded. What? Dad shouted. No. You can't do that. The manager remained calm. The paperwork has already been processed. The bank officially received the cancellation this morning. Mom grabbed my hands desperately. Please. We'll lose everything. I slowly stepped backward. You already lost everything. You just haven't realized it yet. The manager quietly continued. The mortgage now returns to the original repayment schedule. The business loan must be refinanced within 30 days. If not, the bank will begin foreclosure procedures. Dad collapsed into a chair. For the first time in my entire life, my father looked afraid. Not because he lost money. Because he finally realized the daughter he spent years calling a failure had been the reason he still looked successful. Around the ballroom, nobody applauded anymore. Nobody celebrated. The wedding music had stopped. The only sound left was complete silence. Everyone now understood the truth. Not because I argued. Not because I took revenge. Because the facts spoke louder than anything I ever could. The room became completely silent. Nobody was eating anymore. My father looked down at the floor. For the first time in my life, he couldn't find a single excuse. My mother slowly stood up. Her confident smile had disappeared. She looked 20 years older. I didn't know. Those were the only words she could say. I looked at her. No, Mom. You never wanted to know. You decided who I was long before today. You loved the version of me that made my sister look better. But you never cared about the truth. She started crying. Real tears. Not fake ones. I was wrong. I know. But being sorry doesn't erase years of humiliation. The bank manager quietly handed me one last document. Mr. Carter, we still have the closing papers for your parents' mortgage. I nodded. I know. Then I turned toward my parents. I've already instructed the bank to continue paying your mortgage for the next 6 months. Everyone looked surprised. Even my parents. My mother whispered. You're still helping us? I smiled sadly. I'm helping because that's who I am. Not because you deserve it. But after 6 months, you're responsible for everything. My father suddenly stepped forward. I'm sorry, son. I failed you. Those words were something I had waited 20 years to hear. But strangely, they didn't heal anything. Sometimes an apology comes too late. I simply nodded. I accept your apology. But trust has to be earned. The guests slowly surrounded me. Many apologized for believing my parents. Several admitted they never questioned the stories. One uncle quietly said, "We should have listened to you years ago." The wedding continued. But nobody remembered the decorations. Nobody remembered the music. Everyone remembered one thing. The moment the truth walked through the door. 3 months later, my sister called me, not asking for money. Not asking for favors. She asked if we could have coffee. For the first time in years, we talked honestly. She admitted our parents had always compared us. She confessed she had enjoyed being the favorite. But it had also trapped her. She had never learned responsibility. She wanted to change. That conversation became the beginning of a real relationship. Not perfect, but honest. 6 months later, my parents sold their oversized house. They moved into a smaller place. This time, they paid every bill themselves. My father found a part-time consulting job. My mother volunteered at a community charity helping struggling families. One afternoon, my mother quietly handed me an old family photo. I almost threw this away years ago. I'm glad I didn't. It showed a little boy standing beside his parents, smiling. Before favoritism. Before lies. Before pride. She whispered, "I miss this family." I looked at the picture. Then back at her. We can't go back. But maybe we can build something better. A year later, our family gathered again. Not because someone was getting married, Not because someone wanted money. Just dinner. Simple. Peaceful. Nobody talked about salaries. Nobody compared success. Nobody ranked children. For the first time, everyone simply listened. As we left, my father stopped me at the front door. He quietly said, "I used to think wealth was measured by money. I was wrong. The richest person in this family was the one who never stopped showing grace." I smiled, because I finally understood something. Success isn't proving people wrong. Success is refusing to become like the people who hurt you. The bank manager's visit didn't make me successful. Years of quiet work did. My parents' lies didn't destroy me. They motivated me. And revenge? Real revenge isn't humiliation. It's living so well that the truth speaks louder than anger ever could. Final message to viewers. If someone keeps telling you that you'll never succeed, don't waste your life arguing. Build your future quietly. One day, your results will introduce you better than words ever can.